Query folding is Power BI's way of optimizing queries. Say for example, we've created a query that has a few steps which might involve loading a table into Power BI from a database, then filtering the columns because we only want column A, and then also filtering the rows because we only want entries equal to 1. The computational work involved in loading the dataset, which is happening in those first steps coloured in blue, is mainly taken on by the server where the database is hosted. Usually those servers are built to handle these kinds of processing jobs in an efficient way. Then the following on filtering steps that happen after the data is loaded are done by Power BI, so either by your computer if you're using Power BI Desktop, or by Power BI Service if you've published the report. Power BI is usually less efficient at processing data compared to the database server. So this is how the computational work all happens as you're building your query in the data transform view. But after you've finished putting all your steps together and you have a report and you come to do a data refresh of that report, Power BI does a clever bit of optimization. Basically, it looks at the end-to-end steps that you've put into the Power BI and tries to make it into one simplified query. And we call that query folding. In this case, these 3 steps would become one simple query where Power BI asks for data from the database only for column A and where column A is equal to 1. This way, a lot less data has to come into Power BI and a lot more processing is pushed to the server side. Now, query folding gets interesting when you add multiple data sources in. So we have another example where we have the same data source as before, now called database 1, and now we have another database that contains a list of fields that we're interested in, A and B. We want to filter the output of database 1 using the list of fields from database 2, and this is how Power BI would do that without any query folding. So how could this be better optimized? Well, what Power BI can do with folding is take the list from database 2 and use it to construct a query that gets sent to database 1. Then we just get the filtered dataset coming out of database 1 into our Power BI. The only issue with that is now the host of database 1 is potentially aware of the fields that were stored in database 2. To write that query that got sent to database 1, there had to be some sharing of information from database 2 to database 1. When this happens, we say database 2 has been folded into database 1. And that's not really an issue if our information is only letters of the alphabet like we have here, but could become a concern if there's any protected information that you wouldn't want shared, especially if it's with a data source hosted outside of your organization. To manage that, Power BI has 3 privacy levels you can apply to each of your data sources. First of all, there's public. Data sources set to public can be folded into any other data source. Then there's organizational. These data sources will only fold into other organizational and private data sources. Data sources set to organizational will not fold into public data sources. And lastly, there's private. These data sources won't fold into any other data sources. So coming back to our example, if these 2 databases are set to public or organizational, or database 1 is set to private, then query folding will happen and we'll get an optimized query. If dataset 2 has higher privacy settings than dataset 1, for example 1 is public, 2 is organizational, or 1 is anything and 2 is private, then query folding won't happen and we'll go back to this query structure, which is more secure because database 1 now can't tell what's in database 2, but we lose that computational efficiency. So choosing your data source privacy setting is usually weighing up between computational efficiency and data privacy.